Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we're not flying with Leonardo or chasing machines. We're sitting very, very still, by a candle, in the corner of a kitchen in Pisa, Italy. And outside, the world smells like warm bread and rain on roof tiles. You are not yet a name people remember. You're just a boy that you're supposed to be asleep. But you can't stop watching how the flame dances. It bends ever so slightly toward the window. As if it senses the stars, you lean closer, not too close. You've already singed your eyebrows once this month. But you're wondering something again, and wondering doesn't keep bedtime hours. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from a quiet corner of the world, drop your location and time in the comments. I love knowing where you're dreaming from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are Galileo. You don't know that name will echo through time. Right now, it's just what your mother calls when dinner's ready and your father calls when he catches you dismantling the clock again. You are the kind of boy who takes apart things just to see what they remember. A comb, a pocket knife, the weights that make the family clock tick. You break more than you fix. But you notice everything. You notice how the shadow of your spoon moves across the table as the sun fades. You notice that sound travels slower than light. You notice when the church bells ring late. And why? Your father wants you to become a doctor. There's money in medicine, respect, stability. But you want to understand why water spirals in a bowl, why people get dizzy, why the sky isn't just blue. It's sometimes blue. You do what you're told, mostly. You go to classes. You wear shoes. You try to memorize herbs. But the thing is, you keep asking the wrong questions. Why does heat rise? Why do stars sparkle but planets don't? Why does my heartbeat match the swing of that lamp in church? That last one. It changes everything. One evening, during Mass, the great lamp in the cathedral ceiling begins to sway, gently, back and forth. No one notices, but you do. And without paper, without a watch, without permission, you use your pulse to count its rhythm. You match your heartbeat to the swing. You count again, and again. It doesn't matter how wide the arc is, it always takes the same time. That is not how things are supposed to work. But it's how things do work. Later, people will call this isochronism, the principle behind the pendulum clock. But right now, it's just a boy's heartbeat and a brass lamp dancing above him in sacred silence. Historians still argue whether that moment in the cathedral actually happened, or whether it was a beautiful story told later by his students. But you remember the silence, the precision, the awe. You start to test it, with ropes, with stones, with your little brother's swing. You realize that the world has rules, not the kind printed in books, but deeper ones, older ones, the kind that whisper instead of shout. You begin to think maybe the world isn't magic. Maybe it's math in disguise. Your friends don't understand you. They laugh when you scribble notes during mealtimes. They groan when you measure the speed of a falling orange. They call you the quiet one. You don't mind. Quiet has space for questions. And the candle, you're still watching it, night after night. Sometimes it flickers toward the window. Sometimes toward the door. Sometimes it trembles. Even when the air is still, you start drawing flame shapes. Smoke curls. Shadow lengths. You start seeing patterns, not just in fire, in everything. You begin to suspect that the same rule that governs the swinging lamp governs the moon. And maybe, just maybe, the heavens aren't above us, that they're around us. Still, you go to bed. Eventually, you hide your notes under your mattress. You tuck your questions behind your eyelids. And in the stillness of night, with your candle finally out, you stare up at the dark ceiling and whisper, why does it all move the way it does? The answer doesn't come, but something better does. Another question. Section 2. You're back inside that cathedral, the one where the lamp swung gently above your head like a question without punctuation. You're a little taller now. You walk with more confidence, though your shoes are still slightly too big and your pockets too full of string, stones, and folded bits of parchment. Pisa hums around you. Vendors shout. Bells ring. Laundry dances from windows like flags. But you're listening to a different rhythm. You're still thinking about that lamp, the swing of it, the silence between each turn, the consistency. So you go back, over and over, sitting under that very same lamp, testing its motion against the only clock you have, your own heartbeat. You time it with your fingers against your wrist. You count. You blink. You wonder. It always comes back to that same idea. Even as the lamp swings in wide arcs or short ones, the time it takes remains constant, predictable, patient, like the world is whispering. Pay attention, and I'll show you how I breathe. Most people come to this cathedral looking for salvation. You're here for a better way to measure seconds. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galileo's early observations of pendulum motion, allegedly inspired by the swinging chandelier at Pisa Cathedral, would later influence the invention of the pendulum clock, one of the most accurate timekeeping devices for centuries. Back at home, you build your own version. Not a lamp, a rope, a weight, a nail, and a rafter, a system. You try different materials. Water drops. Sand trickles. Wax melting. You're not trying to keep time, you're trying to understand it. To catch it mid-step, mid-swing, mid-thought. Your father watches you scribbling strange graphs with arched lines and frowns. You're supposed to be studying medicine. You nod. Then, the next night, you time how long it takes for a raindrop to slide down the window. The truth is, you're still being a student. Just not of what they want. You're studying motion. How things start, how they stop, how they fall, and why some things fall faster than others, or maybe they don't. That question keeps tapping at your brain like water against stone. So you start dropping things, from windows, from chairs, from ledges. You time them using your heartbeat, a sand glass, your breath. You drop different weights, apples, coins, stones. You expect the heavy ones to fall faster, like Aristotle always said they would. But they don't, not really. They land together. Sometimes the lighter one even wins. This is not how the world is supposed to work, and you love it. You start drawing diagrams of falling objects, little arrows with motion trails, like comets turn downward. One day, you climb the famous Leaning Tower with two heavy cannonballs, one big, one small. You drop them. They hit the ground at almost the same time. The crowd gasps. You grin. Historians still argue whether this tower drop ever really happened. Some say it was a thought experiment. Others claim you did it for real, giggling all the way down the stairs. Either way, the idea stuck. Heavy things don't fall faster because they're heavy. They fall the same because gravity doesn't play favorites. It's a quiet revolution. No thunder. No flags. Just truth, hidden in plain sight. Quirky tidbit. You once tested your theories by rolling balls down inclined planes, watching how acceleration changed with slope. You called it slow motion falling. People called it odd. The math called it brilliant. You're starting to see what others can't. That movement is a language, and that nature speaks it fluently. You study water rolling down gutters. You study wind tugging on curtains. You study the sway of boats and the tilt of shadows. You even sketch a pendulum next to a beating heart and write. All things that repeat, whisper the same. You're not famous yet. You're still awkward, still poor, still often hungry. But inside your notebooks, the world is changing. People begin to notice. You teach a few students. They don't always understand what you're saying, but they like the way your eyes light up when you explain that the stars are more than decoration. You talk about time like it's made of string. You talk about gravity like it's a lullaby pulling us gently downward. And one afternoon, while watching sunlight swing through the dust in your study, you write, "Everything moves, even when we don't see it." Then you lean back, close your eyes, and imagine the earth spinning softly beneath your feet. Section 3. You're standing at the top of a tower again, not the famous leaning one this time. A smaller one, quieter, but just as tall, just as windy, just as perfect for asking the kinds of questions no one else is thinking about. Eye in your hand? Two objects, different weights, same shape, one smooth stone, one chunk of iron. You look over the edge. A few people watch from below. Some are curious. Some are annoyed. One of them is your friend, pretending not to know you. He's seen this before. You count to 3 very scientifically. You let go, and the 2 objects fall not like rival siblings, not like opposites, but like twins. They land together. Or close enough that you know. It's not a trick. Heavier things don't fall faster. They just hit harder. You grin. You've just shattered a piece of Aristotle, not physically, but intellectually. Which, to you, is even better. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Aristotle taught that heavier objects fall faster than lighter ones, a theory that lasted nearly 2,000 years. Galileo's experiments and writings would be the first major cracks in that belief. But this isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about listening to the world better than they did. You start testing everything you can. You build ramps. You time balls rolling down planks. You calculate angles using chalk lines on your floor, using your pulse, your breath, the tick of a dripping faucet. You start drawing motion, not as snapshots, but as curves. You draw how a ball speeds up, how it doesn't just fall, it accelerates. You're seeing things people didn't even have words for yet. Historians still argue whether you fully discovered the law of falling bodies or just glimpsed it, whether your math was rigorous or instinctual, whether you understood what you had before anyone else did. The answer is probably yes to all of it. You keep writing. Your notebooks now are full of strange symbols, arrows, slopes, parabolas. You sketch falling objects in stages, like comic strips of gravity. Your handwriting's a little wild. Your margins are full of coffee stains and side notes like, check with longer ramp, try marble instead of brass. Do birds feel gravity the same way? You begin to notice the relationship between speed and time. That motion isn't just what happens, it's what builds. It's what compounds. You try to map how motion curves across time, not just space, and still people laugh. Why drop things from towers, Galileo? You smile and reply, because I can't reach the moon. Quirky tidbit. You once rolled a cannonball down a corridor at midnight to measure echo speed, and accidentally woke up half the town. You apologized and took notes on how far the sound traveled. Not everyone sees the point, but you do. Every time something moves, whether it's a ball or a bell, a leaf or a lark, you see a secret being spoken. And the more you watch, the more you realize. Nothing is truly still. Even silence is made of tiny shifting things. You begin to suspect that if you could understand motion well enough, you could understand everything. It makes you quiet at parties. It makes you brilliant on paper. Your father is worried. You were supposed to become a doctor. Instead, you're measuring how long it takes for a feather to land on stone. You try to explain that knowing how something falls might someday save a sailor, or build a better bridge, or predict the paths of stars. But all he hears is, no money in it. You shrug. Money can't chart parabolas. You get your hands on a compass, not the kind that finds north, but the kind that draws perfect arcs, and begin designing your own tools. Measuring devices. Mathematical shortcuts. You build a calculator before anyone realizes what one might be useful for. Your students start to gather. They don't always understand you, but they understand wonder. You teach them how to question, how to measure, how to prove, not by shouting, but by dropping things on purpose and recording what happens. It's not glamorous, but it's truth. And the best part, the earth doesn't complain when you ask questions. It just answers in motion. You lie awake some nights thinking about that, about how everything falls not downward, but inward, not toward the ground, but toward the center. It's a small difference, but it changes everything. Section 4. You're sketching the invisible now. Not things you haven't seen, things no one can see. You draw motion as lines, force as curves, time as a trail of dots across the page. To someone else, your notebooks look like scribbles and daydreams. To you, they're maps. Maps of how the world moves when no one is watching. You've begun to think of reality as a machine, not the kind with gears and smoke, but something older, stranger. A system held together by rules you can almost feel but haven't quite named. You pace the room, parchment in hand, muttering numbers under your breath. Your ink-stained fingers trace arcs midair, testing thoughts before they settle into equations. What if sound had a shape? What if light wasn't a glow, but a ripple? What if every falling stone whispers a secret? You draw it. A page full of tiny arrows, each marking the direction a falling object moves. Another page filled with spirals, water draining, air curling, time folding. You draw lines from planets to the sun, imagining invisible strings. Tension. Pull. Gravity doesn't have a name yet. Not really. But you know it exists. You felt it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galileo helped pioneer the study of forces in motion, what would later become kinematics. His methods of representing movement graphically laid the foundation for classical mechanics. But to you, it's not a field, yet. It's just curiosity illustrated. You lie on your back under an open window and watch how dust moves in a sunbeam. You draw its pattern. You wonder what wine looks like when no one's around to chase it. You start drawing sound. Yes, sound. You sketch bells ringing and how their vibrations travel outward in waves. You imagine the air rippling like water when someone speaks. You begin designing a way to measure it, not with a ruler, with time. You sketch a long corridor and a friend with a drum at the other end. You imagine hearing the beat, then calculating how long the echo takes to bounce back. You're measuring the invisible now. Quirky tidbit. You once tried to weigh the power of a sneeze by timing how far it knocked a candle's flame. The flame went out. The data was inconclusive. But you still drew a diagram. You're still teaching, still experimenting, still whispering to the world through math and motion. And the more you sketch the invisible, the more you realize something. All of this, falling, vibrating, orbiting, spinning, it's happening whether we believe it or not. Truth doesn't ask for approval. It just moves. Your diagrams start turning into tools. You design an improved geometric compass that helps soldiers aim cannons more accurately. Suddenly, you have funding. You smile. War is messy, but money is useful. And you spend years on books, glass, and ink. More ink. So much ink. You write pages about pendulums, about weights on inclined planes, about how acceleration can be visualized through shape. Historians still argue whether you understood inertia before Newton, whether you really grasped how resistance and momentum work in harmony. The math wasn't always perfect, but the ideas? They were revolutionary. You begin to imagine the world not as a painting, but as a poem made of numbers. Every motion, every falling leaf, every orbiting moon is a verse. And you're just trying to learn the language. You grow quieter. People start calling you strange again. You don't mind. Strange is a sign you're getting close. And now, late at night, your sketches grow stranger still. A sunbeam curved by time. A planet's path mapped by breath. A child's swing modeled by a set of linked ellipses. It's not art. It's not science. It's both. And you write in the corner of a page, perhaps the world is a drawing, still being drawn. You don't know it yet, but this quiet sketching of the invisible will lead you to your most powerful tool of all, a device that will bring the stars within reach. But for now, you're just listening, just drawing, just waiting for the sky to speak again. Section 5. You hear about it in a letter. A new device, invented in the Netherlands. A simple tube with glass inside. When you look through it, distant things appear closer. You pause mid-sentence. Mid-chew. Mid-thought. A tube that sees farther. Your pulse quickens. You don't wait for someone to send you one. You start building your own that same day. You find two lenses, convex and concave, grind them down with dust and patience, and fit them inside a pipe. It's crude. It's blurry. But it works. You point it at the tower across the square. Suddenly, you can count the bricks. You adjust the angle. Now you can read the sails of ships in the harbor. Hours before they dock, your heart pounds. This isn't just a toy. It's a doorway. You keep refining it. Your hands grow sore from polishing lenses, adjusting lengths, filing edges. But you don't stop. You've never been this excited about a tube. You build a better one. Stronger. Clearer. With each improvement, your vision doubles. Triples. The world is growing, not in size, but in detail. And then, one night, you do the obvious. You point it at the sky. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galileo was not the inventor of the telescope, but he was the first to use it methodically for astronomical observation, fundamentally changing our understanding of the cosmos. You look at the moon, it's not smooth, it's not perfect, it's covered in mountains and craters. Light and shadow. The surface looks almost like Earth. You feel a chill. You tilt the telescope and point it at stars. You see more than you ever imagined. And then, Jupiter, a bright disk. Tiny, but clear, and beside it, little lights. At first you think they're stars, but the next night, they've moved, and the next night, they've moved again. Not randomly. In orbit, they're circling Jupiter, like a family. You don't say anything for a moment. You just stare, your breath fogging the eyepiece. The Earth is not the center, not of those lights. Not of everything. You scribble notes with shaking hands, for stars moving around Jupiter, like the moon moves around Earth. You've just discovered the Galilean moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. But you don't name them after yourself. You name them Medicean stars, a political gesture. Even visionaries have rent to pay. You spend the next nights watching them dance. 4 little dots, weaving around a planet, proving in silence what philosophers have argued over for centuries. Not everything revolves around us. You publish your findings. You call it. The starry messenger. It flies through Italy like wildfire. Some praise you. Some dismiss you. Some say, "But I looked through your telescope and saw nothing." You smile politely. You have to know what to look for. Historians still debate how much people believed you right away. Some did. Others resisted. Some were stunned into silence. One man accused your telescope of being possessed. You offered to build him another one. He declined. Quirky tidbit. You built over 60 telescopes in your lifetime, often improving them just hours after claiming the last one was perfect. And still, you pointed higher. You observe the Milky Way and realize it's made of stars too faint to see with the naked eye. You look at Saturn and see something strange. It has ears, you write. You don't know what you're seeing. It'll take better telescopes to reveal the rings. But still, you draw it. You note sunspots on the surface of the sun, dark blemishes. Shifting, changing. The heavens, once believed to be perfect, now show imperfection, movement, turbulence, change. You begin to suspect the sky is not a serene clock wound by divinity, it's a storm of patterns, and we are caught in its spiral. You stay up late every night. You forget to eat. Your fingers are ink-stained, glass-cut, and dust-covered. But your eyes are wider than ever. That you're not just seeing the universe, that you're watching it move. And you whisper, not to anyone in particular, "What else haven't we seen yet?" Section 6. You can't stop watching Jupiter, night after night. You drag your telescope to the roof, or the courtyard, or any patch of ground wide enough to tilt your neck and steady your hands. The air is cold. Your breath fogs the lens. But you barely notice, because there they are. Again, 4 tiny moons, strung like beads on an invisible thread, dancing around Jupiter like it's their sun. They move slightly each night, and you track their positions in careful, tiny dots. Dot, 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 shift, dot, shift, dot. You realize, slowly, thrillingly, they're orbiting. Not wandering. Not random. Orbiting. That word hits you like music. Nothing in Aristotle's model allows for this, that it's a revelation with moons attached. For centuries, people believed that everything in the heavens revolved around the earth. Fixed spheres, perfect circles, crystalline orbs moved by angels and harmony. And yet, here are 4 moons calmly ignoring Earth entirely. They do not care where we are. You start to feel something no one said aloud in polite society. We might not be the center of anything. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In January 1610, Galileo discovered the 4 largest moons of Jupiter, now called the Galilean moons, marking the first time celestial bodies were seen orbiting something other than Earth. This observation dealt a powerful blow to the geocentric model of the universe. You can't keep this to yourself. So you write. Not a secret letter. Not a whisper. A book. You call it Sidereus Nuncius, the starry messenger. It's a small thing. just a booklet. A collection of drawings, measurements, and breathless notations of what you've seen. The tone is careful, but the message is not. Look. Look again. The sky isn't what we thought it was. You described the mountains on the moon. The stars clustered in the Milky Way. The dancing moons of Jupiter. People are stunned. Some don't believe it. Some do, and it rattles them. And some are furious. Because if Jupiter has moons, and the moon has shadows, and the stars go deeper than our eyes can reach, then maybe, just maybe, the universe is not built for us or about us or by the rules we've written down so confidently. You dedicate the booklet to Cosimo II de' Medici, your noble sponsor, and cleverly named Jupiter's moons after him and his brothers. A bit of flattery wrapped in astronomy. Smart. Political. A wink to the heavens and the court. Quirky tidbit. You first called them the Medicean stars before they were later renamed by others in your honor. At the time, naming celestial bodies after rich patrons was basically the 17th century version of product placement. The starry messenger sells out fast. Copies are hand-carried between cities, read aloud in salons, scribbled on in the margins by philosophers who now question everything they've been taught. One man says your telescope is a trick. You offer to let him borrow it. He refuses. Others copy you. They build telescopes. They look for themselves. Some agree. Some lie about what they see. Some claim you've bewitched the glass. You don't argue. You just keep drawing. Jupiter and her moons become your quiet obsession. You write pages and pages of observations, diagrams, orbital patterns. You note how their speed changes with their distance. You map their dance like a composer reading notes. Historians still argue whether you understood orbital mechanics or simply recorded it with awe. But every entry of yours begins the same way. I turned the instrument skyward, and suddenly, the world opens again. You realize the universe is not still. It is spinning. You realize Earth is not exempt from motion. It is motion, and that truth, gentle, profound, inarguable, is what you begin to carry forward. People still ask, what else have you seen? You hesitate, because what you've seen is just the beginning. What you now believe, what you barely dare to whisper, is something more dangerous. You no longer think Earth sits still. You think it spins. You think it orbits. You think Copernicus might have been right, but you're not ready to say that. Not yet. For now, you hold that thought like a lit candle cupped in your hands, and you watch Jupiter's moons dance, because they know, and you know. And that's enough, for now. Section 7. You write by candlelight now. Pages and pages. Your desk is scattered with star charts, lens fragments, diagrams of Jupiter's moons, and little notes scribbled on scraps of parchment. One of them just says, "What is light really?" You aren't whispering anymore. You're publishing. Because after what you've seen, those dancing moons, the mountain shadows on the moon, the snowstorm of stars in the Milky Way, you have to tell people. You call your new work Letters on Sunspots. Catchy. It's a calm, almost casual title for a book that quietly sets fire to centuries of certainty. You describe dark blemishes on the sun. They shift, move, vanish, return. They are imperfections to eye in the sky. And if the sun, a symbol of divinity, clarity, perfection, can be blemished, then the entire philosophy of a flawless heavens begins to unravel. Not violently, just gently. One spot at a time. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galileo's observations of sunspots challenged the prevailing Aristotelian idea that the heavens were immutable and perfect. He argued that celestial bodies could change, could erode, even. Your words begin to ripple outward. Some people are thrilled, some are confused, and some are starting to get nervous, especially in Rome, because you're not just writing about celestial mechanics anymore, that you're touching something deeper, darker, heavier. That you're questioning the foundation of the old worldview. And the old worldview doesn't like being questioned. Still, you write, because you've learned something dangerous about truth. It doesn't wait for permission. You describe your observations with math, with diagrams, with humble wonder. You write as if the stars are your colleagues, and the universe is a patient teacher who always knew you'd come around. And some of the church's scholars? They agree with you. In private, quietly, with locked doors and lowered voices, but others begin circling. Not yet with chains, but with questions. You suggest the heavens are changing? You say the earth moves? You think we orbit? You don't say yes, not directly, but you don't say no. You smile, and you write more. Quirky tidbit. You once wrote a letter defending your findings by comparing those who refused to look through your telescope to someone refusing to taste food before declaring it unclean. Politely savage. In Rome, the church watches. They don't move against you. Yet, but there's a silence now, thick and slow, like storm clouds before the first drop. And in that silence, you keep working. You refine your telescope again. You measure Venus. You see its phases. And that is the last little domino, because Venus shouldn't have phases. Not if it circles Earth. But if it circles the sun, it makes sense. So you write again. This time, with more certainty. The geocentric model is not only flawed, it's wrong. You don't scream it. You don't fight. You just shine a light and let the darkness fall away on its own. But Rome hears you now. Clearly, they ask for conversations, then clarifications, then a quiet warning. You begin to feel eyes on you that aren't curious anymore. And still, every night, you point your telescope upward and whisper, "You can't silence the stars." Section 8. The silence grows heavier. It doesn't knock on your door. It doesn't shout. It seeps into conversations, settles into pauses, hangs just behind the polite smiles of cardinals and scholars. Rome has read your words. They've seen your diagrams. They know you're not just describing planets anymore. You're describing a world that no longer fits neatly within theology. The earth moves, the heavens change, and you are no longer whispering. You're writing letters. To friends, to rivals, to the church itself. You aren't arrogant. You aren't loud, but you are clear. You argue with elegance. You quote scripture and Copernicus. You call for harmony between faith and reason, not war. You say that mathematics reveals the divine order better than speculation ever could, and for a while, that works. The church doesn't condemn you. Not yet, but they do start circling. Quietly. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In 1616, the Catholic Church officially declared the heliocentric model formally heretical and warned Galileo not to teach or defend it. He was not yet punished, but a line had been drawn. You receive a warning. They say you may continue your studies as long as you do not suggest the earth moves. You nod. You keep writing. Just more carefully. You tell yourself it's fine. That truth will still rise like the moon, even if veiled in clouds. But it gnaws at you, because you know what you've seen. And worse, you know others have seen it too. You start writing in a new way, not with facts, with dialogue. You begin composing a book that isn't a manifesto. It's a conversation. A thought experiment between three characters, one defending the old model, one the new, and one, the everyman, who listens, questions, and slowly begins to change. The book is called Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems. It's your most daring work, because it lets readers decide for themselves. You don't shout. You don't accuse. You just place the earth in motion. And let the ideas speak. It's clever. It's passionate. It's dangerous. Quirky tidbit. You cleverly named your character defending the geocentric model Simplicio, which technically was a reference to a historical philosopher. But many took it as an insult, including, allegedly, the Pope. You publish the dialogue in 1632. It spreads faster than your telescope diagrams ever did. People laugh. People gasp. People choose, and Rome calls you in, not for tea, for trial. Historians still argue whether you could have softened the tone, whether your cleverness crossed into provocation, whether you overestimated your friendships inside the Vatican. But it no longer matters. You're summoned to the Holy Office. To explain. To answer. To defend. You pack your papers. You leave your telescope behind. And on the road to Rome, you whisper to yourself, not in anger, not in fear, but in sadness, because you know what silence sounds like before it roars. Section 9. The room is cold, not from weather, from history, from weight, from the silence of people who aren't here to learn, they're here to judge. You sit quietly at the tribunal, hands folded, eyes soft. You are not trembling, but your thoughts, those never sit still. A row of men in robes stares down at you. Their voices are calm, measured. Their questions are not. They want to know why you wrote the dialogue, why you published it after the warning, why your character defending the Earth's motion sounds so much like you. You explain, not defensively, but gently. You say it's a conversation, not a conclusion. You say you followed the rules. You say truth is not a sword, it's a candle. And even under threat, a candle still burns. But they don't want metaphors. They want compliance. They tell you your book is dangerous, that it confuses the faithful, that it suggests certainty where the church demands humility. And still, you try to speak for reason. You say, the Bible shows the way to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. They do not smile. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In 1633, Galileo was brought before the Roman Inquisition and forced to recant his support of heliocentrism. Though he argued the dialogue was balanced, the church found him vehemently suspect of heresy. They show you the documents, the papal orders, the ban on Copernicus's model, your own notes. They tell you to recant. To deny what you've seen. To say, clearly, in front of witnesses, that the earth does not move. And if you refuse, torture is implied, not promised. You are 69 years old. Your health is fragile. Your hands tremble, not from fear, but from age. And you are tired. Tired of arguing with those who do not look through the lens. Tired of explaining light to those who hide in shadow. So you speak the words, I abjure, curse, and detest the heresies I have held. You say what they demand. You lower your eyes, and then the legend begins, quietly, silently, so softly it may not have happened, but it should have. As you rise from the tribunal floor, someone hears you mutter under your breath, Epores I move. And yet, it moves. Historians still argue whether you actually said it, whether it's a later invention, whether it was whispered, thought, imagined. But the phrase became immortal because it captures something you never lost, your faith and truth. They sentence you to house arrest. Indefinitely. Your books are banned. Your dialogue is forbidden. Your name is now spoken in hushed tones, as if curiosity itself were a crime. You go home, not to freedom, but to boundaries.no, travel.no, lectures.no, telescope, quirky tidbit, even under house arrest. You continued scientific work. You were not allowed visitors without approval, but friends disguised themselves as servants to bring you wine and news. They thought they could cage your mind, but your thoughts had already orbited the sun. They thought they could silence your voice, but your words had already been copied, memorized, carried in secret. And you go to your room. You light your candle, and you begin again. Because even when they take away your sky, you still know the earth is spinning beneath your feet. Section 10. House arrest sounds simple until you live it. Until the world shrinks to the walls of your villa in Arcetri. Until the telescope gathers dust in a corner because you are forbidden to use it. Until visitors become whispers, and whispers become memories. The silence is thicker than ever, not the comfortable kind. The kind that presses down, but you are still you. Even here, even now. You wake early. Sit by the window. Watch how the morning light climbs the wall at the exact same angle every day. You time it. Sketch it. Note the tiny variations caused by clouds, seasons, mood. Your mind never agreed to be arrested. So it doesn't stop. You begin writing a new book, not about moons or motion, about something older, something quieter. Something the church can't argue with, falling objects in motion on Earth. You call it Two New Sciences, and it is brilliant. It gathers your life's work, the pendulums, the inclined planes, the calculations of falling speeds, and folds them into careful dialogue. It's written like your last one, conversational, playful, dangerous. But this time, you don't send it to Rome. You send it to the Dutch. It's published far from the Inquisition's reach. And it spreads, quietly, quickly. The world still wants your mind. Even if they've tried to lock up your body. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galileo's two new sciences, published in 1638, became a foundational text in physics. It influenced scientists like Newton and paved the way for classical mechanics. By now, your sight is beginning to fade. The candlelight you once read by is too bright. Letters blur. The moon no longer reveals its scars to you. Jupiter's children dance on without your eyes to follow. You are going blind. Slowly. Surely. And it breaks your heart in the softest way, because the sky has been your friend since you were a barefoot boy watching the cathedral lamp swing. Now it's out of reach, but not out of memory. You close your eyes and see it anyway. You dictate your thoughts. Students sit at your side. You speak. They write. They struggle to keep up with how your voice quickens when you talk about motion, about the curve of a thrown stone, about the difference between weight and mass. You don't draw anymore, but your words still sketch. And what you can no longer see, you remember. You say. Measure what can be measured, and make measurable what cannot. Quirky tidbit. You once used your fading sense of touch to describe how a vibrating string feels. You said it sings, even when I do not. You no longer need the stars in your telescope, because the stars live in your notebooks. I and the letters sent between scholars. I and the minds of children asking, why does this fall? You may be still, but your ideas are already moving again, across borders, across years, into hands that will build better lenses, better questions, better worlds. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and your sight is dim to nothing, you sit with your candle and whisper to yourself, I can't see the earth turning, but I feel it. And you smile, because truth does not ask for light. It asks only to be followed. Section 11. You sit near the window now, though you can no longer see through it. The light still warms your face, though. You know it's there by the shift in air, by the way the birds change their songs from morning to afternoon. The world still moves, even when you can't watch it. And you're still listening. Your eyes have faded completely. You are, by all practical terms, blind. But you don't say that. You say you've turned your sight inward. You say the stars are still with you. They've just become quieter. You still speak with students. They come to your villa like pilgrims now, traveling dusty roads for a chance to sit near your chair, to hear the man who once watched Jupiter blink. You teach them gently, with humor, with warmth, with metaphors, mostly. You describe velocity using music. You compare gravity to a conversation between falling bodies. You laugh when they don't understand something, because that means they're close. You tell them. If something is confusing, it means it is trying to become clear. And they write it all down. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In his final years under house arrest, completely blind, Galileo dictated his greatest scientific contributions to devoted students, many of whom would become prominent thinkers in their own right. You begin reflecting on your life's work. You don't call it legacy. That word feels too heavy, too finished. Instead, you think of your work as echoes. Pendulums still swing because of what you saw. Objects still fall in curves because of what you tested. Eyes still turn upward because of what you dared to see. One day, a student asks you if you regret recanting. You pause, then answer quietly. What matters most is that I saw. They ask if you think the church will ever change. You smile wider this time. Eventually, everyone looks up. Quirky tidbit. Despite being blind, you continued inventing. You once helped design a method to measure a heartbeat using a pendulum and string. Old habits die very slowly. You start speaking to the stars again, in your own way. Not through lenses, but through memory. You talk to the moon like an old friend. You murmur the names of Jupiter's moons like lullabies. You repeat orbital equations out loud, not for anyone else, just to hear how they sound now. And when the nights are especially quiet, you let your chair creak a little as you rock in it, feeling the earth's turn not with your body, but with something deeper. You tell yourself, even in darkness, I am still moving. The world outside still fears some of your books, still bans some of your pages, but they can't ban the questions anymore. They're too loud, too bright, too many, because by now, Others have picked up your telescope. Others have walked the roads you once paced. And others have learned how to fall forward. You were once a boy watching a lamp swing. Now, you are a man who swung the world's axis ever so slightly. They called you a heretic, a troublemaker, a risk. But really, you were just curious. And as your days grow fewer and your candle burns lower, you find yourself whispering the same thing you've always whispered. Why does it move like that? Not because you still need the answer, but because the question was always the gift. Section 12. The villa grows quieter. The students visit less now. Letters arrive more slowly, folded in stiff parchment with foreign seals, always addressed with reverent titles, to the great Galileo, to the most illustrious philosopher. You smile when you hear them read aloud, not because you believe them, but because it's funny how the world changes its tone once you've aged enough to become safe. The church still watches you, but from a distance. The house arrest remains. So does the silence around your dialogue. But no one knocks on your door with anger anymore. They come with curiosity now. Even those who once whispered against you are starting to soften. The earth still moves. But so do ideas. You receive a letter from a young man named Vincenzo Viviani. He begs to study with you. He's brilliant, eager, maybe a little too loud. But you like that. Loud minds shake things. You accept him. He becomes your hands, your eyes, your extension. You dictate to him everything you still carry in your mind. From the earliest pendulums to your final theories of motion. He listens carefully. He writes quickly, and every so often, you hear his pen slow, and you know he's thinking. You wait for the question. It always comes. That's how you know someone is ready to learn. They stop copying and start wondering. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Vincenzo Viviani, one of Galileo's final students, preserved much of his work and would later become one of the key figures in ensuring Galileo's writings and ideas were passed on to future generations. You dictate fragments of unfinished ideas. A new type of balance. A thought about the speed of light. A hunch that tides are connected not just to the moon, but to motion itself. Some things you never finish. You don't need to. Your work is already echoing beyond you. In other languages, other lands. You hear that telescopes are being built in Germany and France. Some of them better than yours. You love that. Progress is not a race. It's a relay. And you were never meant to cross the finish line alone. You receive news from Rome, indirect, vague. A few church officials are starting to accept that the earth might, in fact, move. Quietly, privately. You chuckle when you hear that. You tell Viviani, they're late to the dance, but at least they brought shoes. Quirky tidbit. You requested that if your dialogue could never be formally published again, then perhaps it could be performed, read aloud in homes. You said science should sound like conversation, like wonder shared between friends. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, you can smell the sea. You picture the ships in harbor, the sails taut, the compass needles trembling. You imagine one sailor, just one, bringing a telescope to the bow and pointing it upward instead of forward. What might he see? What might he ask? That, more than anything, fills you with peace, not the glory. Not the apology you never received. Just the idea that somewhere, someone is wondering. And wonder is movement. It is the mind stepping out of stillness. You've learned by now that the greatest truths don't shout. They whisper. They flicker. They wait. And you? You listen long enough to catch a few. The world will move forward, even if it had to leave you behind to do it. You lean back in your chair, the one near the window, where the breeze finds your face. You can't see the sky anymore, but you still feel its pull, still hear its math, still trust its rhythm. And every now and then, when Viviani leaves the room, you whisper again, Eper si moth. Because it does, and so do you. Section 13. You're near the end now, not in a sad way. In a gentle way, like the flame of a candle growing low, not because it's snuffed out, but because it has done what it came to do. You sit mostly in silence. But your mind is never still. Even blind, you still see things others don't. When Viviani reads to you letters, equations, a passage from a book, you don't just listen. You picture it, feel it, You run your fingers across the edge of the table and imagine how sound might vibrate differently across wood than across stone. You think about motion more than ever, not grand, planetary motion now, but small things, the tremble of breath, the weight of stillness, the arc of a hand rising to drink. You ask questions still, and always in that same tone, as if the world might finally answer if you just say it kindly enough. You begin organizing your last ideas, not to publish, just to leave behind. You dictate to Viviani about pendulums again, about why a ball accelerates, about how, if no resistance existed, motion might never end. You're speaking Newton's future, without knowing the name. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galileo's final writings laid essential groundwork for Newton's first law of motion, even though Galileo never formulated it fully. His concept of inertia, objects in motion remaining in motion, was centuries ahead. You talk about the moon's pull on tides, the shape of a falling object's path, the way sound might travel faster through stone than air. And you do it all with a tone like you're describing something already beautiful, not something to be conquered, but something to be understood. One night, Viviani asks, "Do you wish you'd seen more?" You turn your head slowly. "No," you say. "I saw long enough to know where to keep looking." Quirky tidbit. In your last year, you attempted to calculate the strength of materials, why bridges collapse, why beams bend. You were fascinated with failure, not for its sadness, but for the truth it reveals. You sleep more now. Your breath comes slower. You stop speaking mid-sentence sometimes, lost in thought. Viviani doesn't interrupt. He waits. Sometimes you don't finish your sentence at all. Sometimes you do, and it ends in something like, "But perhaps that's how the moon learned to glow." You say things like that. Little riddles. Little poems. It makes sense to you. You ask for your children to visit. They come. Quietly. Sitting nearby. Unsure what to say. You smile at their silence. You always liked silence best when it was filled with thought. You no longer measure time by clocks. You measure it by shadows across the floor, by the ache in your hands, by the fading warmth of candle wax after it's been blown out. You know the end is coming, but it doesn't frighten you, because what you needed to say, you've said. What you needed to question, you've asked. And what you needed to begin, you began. Even if you didn't finish, that was never the point. Section 14. It's morning. The candle has burned low. The pages have all been turned. The voices in the house are hushed, but steady, like they've been expecting this quiet. That you're gone now. Not violently. Not suddenly. You left like a breath being released after holding it in for 77 years. You die in your bed in Arcetri, surrounded by silence and sunlight. And the earth, it keeps moving. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galileo Galilei died on January 8, 1642. He was still under house arrest. His contributions to physics, astronomy, and the scientific method would not be fully recognized until long after his death. The church does not allow your burial in the Grand Basilica of Santa Croce. Not yet. You're too dangerous still. Too loud. Even after death. They bury you quietly. Not where you belong. But history. History has a way of remembering, and it remembers you. Not just the telescope, not just the moons, not just the trial, but the mind, the way you kept asking. The way you made people uncomfortable, not because you shouted, but because you asked them to look, really look, and when they refused, you looked harder. Viviani keeps your work alive. He protects your papers. He copies your ideas. He defends your name even when people still speak it like a cautionary tale. Others begin to pick up the pieces. Kepler, Newton, Halley. They take what you left behind and build it taller, stronger, brighter, but they all start at the same place. A boy in Pisa, watching a lamp swing. Your telescope is preserved, held in museums like a relic. Students kneel to examine its lenses. Children peer through replicas, gasping at the moon's craters the same way you once did. And one day, in a quiet corner of Florence, the church changes its mind. They move your body to Santa Croce. A grand tomb. A statue. A plaque. Too late for you to see it. But maybe not too late for truth. Quirky tidbit. In 1992, 350 years after your death, the Vatican formally acknowledged that you were right, that the Earth does, indeed, move. It only took the institution you challenged 3.5 centuries to admit it. Historians still debate how much of your legacy was science and how much was story. They ask, were you a martyr? A rebel? A mathematician with good timing? But the answer is simpler. You were someone who paid attention to the flicker of light, the fall of stone, the quiet drift of the heavens. And long after your voice went still, your questions kept moving. They turned into telescopes, into laws of motion, into children pointing at the stars and asking, why? You don't have to answer them anymore. They've learned how to ask for themselves. Section 15. You're not here anymore. But your questions are. They float in classrooms, on observatory decks, in books with worn corners and coffee stains. They live in the eyes of students who stay up too late scribbling in notebooks. In the silence between someone looking at the moon and realizing for the first time, it's not just decoration, the stars don't know your name, but they remember your gaze. You, who once leaned out a window in Pisa to measure the arc of a swinging lamp. You, who dared to say, look again. Your telescope, wooden, chipped, humble, sits in a museum case now. Tourists file past it. Some snap photos. Some stare. But one or two lean close as if they might still hear the sky whispering through the lens. And somewhere far away, a child looks up through a telescope and sees 4 tiny dots lined up around Jupiter. They gasp. Not because they understand orbital mechanics, but because they feel something moving. And you're there. Not in body, not in breath, but in that gas. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Galileo's contributions shaped the entire scientific revolution. His name became synonymous with the power of observation, courage in the face of dogma, and the belief that evidence should guide understanding. People still say your name in sentences that begin with, because of Galileo, because of Galileo. We built better telescopes. Because of Galileo, we stopped fearing questions. Because of Galileo, the Earth could move. Quirky tidbit. Your middle finger, preserved in a glass jar, rests in a museum in Florence. Not everyone gets to literally point toward the stars forever. But maybe you earned that one. There is no monument tall enough for what you started. No tomb quiet enough to hold your voice. Because what you left behind is not marble or ink. It's a direction. Up, outward, forward. You are not a statue. You are not a legend. You are a compass. And now, when the sky darkens, when the stars shimmer into focus, when the earth hums gently beneath our feet, we remember not what you told us, but what you showed us. That truth is not static. It orbits. It drifts, and it waits for those willing to follow it far enough into the dark. Knew the sky is quiet. The stars above your roof don't rush. The moon is still there, soft and silver, floating like a held breath. And the earth beneath you? It moves. Slowly. Silently. Just like he said it would. You've heard his story now. All of it. The boy who timed a swinging lamp with his pulse. The man who stared through glass until the heavens cracked open. The prisoner who whispered the truth anyway. Galileo never shouted. He never waged war. He just kept looking. And tonight, maybe you feel a little of what he felt. The hush before discovery. The tug of a question too beautiful to answer. The comfort of knowing that wonder doesn't need permission. Let your thoughts drift now, like satellites in quiet orbit. Let your breath slow, like the pendulum he once watched. Let your body rest, like a world turning gently in the dark. Because the questions will still be here tomorrow. And tonight, you don't have to solve them. Just float alongside them, because truth is patient, and stars are always listening. You've traveled through time, through silence, through space, through Galileo's mind. You don't need a telescope, just stillness, just curiosity, just peace. So rest now. And if you dream of moons dancing, or candles flickering in rooms lined with parchment, or of stars drifting just out of reach, let them drift. You'll catch them when you're ready. For now, sleep. The earth is still moving, and so are you. End of script. Sweet dreams.